The lunch rush at Bluebird Diner had finally died down. Maylin wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and looked around at the aftermath. Empty coffee cups with lipstick marks, half-eaten sandwiches, crumpled napkins. The familiar smell of grease and coffee grounds hung in the air. This was her life now, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when Denise called in sick. "Order up," Frank's gruff voice called from the kitchen. Maylin tucked a strand of black hair behind her ear and grabbed the plates. Meatloaf special, side of mashed potatoes that looked like they'd seen better days. The customer, an older man in a worn flannel shirt who came in every Wednesday, barely looked up when she placed the food in front of him. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked. The same question she'd repeated at least 50 times today. He shook his head, already cutting into the meatloaf. Maylin moved to the next table, refilling water glasses, collecting a measly $5 tip. Her feet ached in the cheap sneakers she'd bought on sale last month. They were already wearing thin. The bell above the door jingled and she glanced over to see a middle-aged woman with curly gray hair enter. Great, another customer just when she thought she might get a 5-minute break. Maylin plastered on her waitress smile and grabbed a menu. "Just one today?" she asked, leading the woman to a booth by the window. "Yes, thank you." The woman had kind eyes and a gentle voice. "Just a coffee for now." As Maylin poured the coffee, she noticed the woman studying her face with unusual interest. "I'm sorry," the woman said, "but you look so familiar. Have we met before?" Maylin shook her head. "I don't think so. I've been working here for almost 3 years now." "No, it was somewhere else." The woman tilted her head. "Do you play an instrument by any chance?" The question hit Maylin like a punch to the stomach. Her hand trembled slightly, coffee nearly spilling over the rim of the cup. "I used to," she said quietly. "The violin." The woman snapped her fingers. "That's it. I saw you perform at the Young Musician Showcase. Must have been 5, maybe 6 years ago." Maylin stood frozen, coffee pot suspended in midair. That showcase had been one of the last times she'd performed publicly, back when her future seemed full of possibility, when her hands were meant for delicate bowstrings instead of carrying plates of greasy food. "I'm Patricia Chen," the woman continued. "I teach music at the community center on Elm Street. You played Mendelssohn, didn't you? It was beautiful." "Thank you," Maylin replied stiffly, her throat suddenly dry. "Will you be ordering any food today?" Patricia seemed to sense her discomfort. "Just some toast, please." Maylin nodded and hurried away, grateful for the excuse to escape. In the kitchen, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to push down the memories that were bubbling to the surface. "You okay?" Frank asked, his bushy eyebrows furrowed with rare concern. "I'm fine." She straightened up and called out the toast order. "Just tired." The rest of her shift dragged on. She avoided Patricia's table as much as possible, sending Tanya over with the check when it was time. But as Patricia was leaving, she stopped by the counter where Maylin was rolling silverware into napkins. "I hope this isn't too forward," Patricia said, sliding a business card across the counter. "But we're always looking for volunteers at the center. Even if you don't play anymore, music people tend to find each other for a reason." Maylin took the card automatically but didn't say anything. After Patricia left, she shoved the card into her apron pocket and forgot about it. By the time her shift ended at 7 p.m., dark clouds had gathered, and rain poured down in sheets. Maylin huddled under the tiny awning, wishing she hadn't forgotten her umbrella again. The bus stop was 3 blocks away and she was already exhausted. "Need a ride?" Tanya asked, coming out behind her. "It's okay. You live in the opposite direction. Suit yourself. See you tomorrow." Maylin watched Tanya dash to her car, then took a deep breath and stepped into the rain. By the time she reached her apartment building, she was soaked to the bone and shivering. The elevator was out of order, again, so she trudged up 4 flights of stairs to her tiny 1-bedroom apartment. She flicked on the lights and sighed at the familiar sight. Dishes in the sink from breakfast, an unmade bed visible through the bedroom door, a small TV on a stand that had seen better days. But her eyes, as always, were drawn to the black case leaning in the corner. She hadn't opened it in months, but she couldn't bring herself to get rid of it either. As she peeled off her wet clothes and stepped into a hot shower, She thought about Patricia and the showcase the woman had mentioned. Maylin had been 19 then, a scholarship student at the conservatory, her future stretching bright and clear before her. Then her mother got sick. Cancer. The treatments weren't covered by insurance. The choice had been impossible but simple: her mother's life or her music career. She'd withdrawn from school, deferred her scholarship, picked up waitressing temporarily to help with bills. Her mother had recovered, thankfully, but by then the scholarship had gone to someone else. The conservatory had been sympathetic but firm. They had limited spots, limited funds. They'd encouraged her to reapply the following year. But then her mother had relapsed, and Maylin had watched her savings drain away again. 1 year turned into 2, then 3. The diner job became permanent. Her violin gathered dust. After her shower, Maylin heated up leftover Chinese food and ate standing at her kitchen counter, scrolling mindlessly through social media. She paused on a post from an old conservatory friend, now playing with the symphony orchestra in Chicago. The familiar sting of what could have been twisted in her chest. Before bed, she emptied her apron pockets and found Patricia's business card. Community Center Arts Program, it read, with Patricia's name and number. Maylin almost tossed it in the trash, but instead placed it on her refrigerator, holding it in place with a magnet shaped like a music note, a gift from her mother years ago. The next morning arrived too soon. Her manager, Dale, was in a foul mood because one of the cooks had called out. Maylin kept her head down and worked quickly, trying to avoid his critical gaze. The lunch rush was even busier than usual. A tour bus had stopped unexpectedly, filling every booth and table. By mid-afternoon, when things finally slowed down, Maylin's back ached and her patience was wearing thin. She was counting her tips at the counter when Dale approached. "Light day, huh?" he said, looking at the small pile of bills. "It's been busy, but people aren't tipping much," she replied. Dale shrugged. "That's too bad. Anyway, I need to adjust the schedule. I'm cutting your Thursday shift." "What?" "But I need those hours. Business has been slow. I have to make cuts somewhere." Maylin wanted to argue that business clearly wasn't slow, given today's rush, but she bit her tongue. Dale walked away, already barking orders at Tanya about a spill in the corner booth. Later, as she was refilling salt shakers, she overheard a conversation between 2 regulars at the counter. "Dale's been skimming from the tip jar again," one whispered. "My niece used to work here, said he's been doing it for years. That's why I always hand my tip directly to the waitress," the other replied. Maylin pretended not to hear, but her stomach churned with anger. If Dale was taking from the communal tip jar, was he also skimming from the credit card tips before distributing them? It would explain why her take-home pay had been steadily decreasing despite the diner being as busy as ever. That night she found herself staring at Patricia's card on her refrigerator. The community center was only about 20 minutes by bus from her apartment. She had Thursdays off now, thanks to Dale. Maybe it wouldn't hurt just to see what the place was like. Before she could talk herself out of it, she grabbed her phone and added the center's address to her calendar for Thursday afternoon. She carefully avoided looking at the violin case in the corner, telling herself this visit had nothing to do with music or her past. It was just something different, a break from the monotony of her life. But as she fell asleep that night for the first time in years, she dreamed of playing. In her dream, her fingers moved across the strings with the old familiarity, drawing out notes that soared and dipped like birds in flight. She woke with the ghost of music in her ears, and the faintest feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, not all doors to her past were permanently closed. Thursday morning felt different. Maylin woke up before her alarm, the sun streaming through the gap in her curtains. For once, she didn't hit snooze 3 times. She sat up, stretching her arms overhead, and glanced at the violin case in the corner. It seemed to be watching her. "It's just a visit," she said out loud to the empty room. "Nothing serious." She spent more time than usual choosing what to wear. The community center visit wasn't until 2 p.m., but nervousness had settled in her stomach like a stone. After trying on and rejecting 4 outfits, she settled on jeans and a blue sweater her mother had given her last birthday. Simple, but not like she was trying too hard. With hours to kill, she cleaned her apartment, something she usually put off until her day off. She washed the dishes that had piled up, made her bed, and even vacuumed the carpet. While dusting the bookshelf, her hand paused over a framed photo, herself, at 17, holding her violin after winning a regional competition. Her mother stood beside her, beaming with pride, her arm around Maylene's shoulders. At 1:30, she caught the bus across town. The community center was in an old brick building that had once been a school. A colorful mural decorated one wall, showing children playing various instruments. Maylene stood outside for a few minutes, almost turning around twice before finally pushing open the heavy front door. Inside, the hallways echoed with sounds, a piano somewhere, children laughing, the squeak of sneakers on the linoleum floor. A hand-drawn sign pointed the way to the music room. Maylene followed it, her heart pounding against her ribs. The music room was larger than she expected. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle, and shelves along the walls held instruments of all kinds, many looking well used. A group of children, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sat in the chairs, holding violins of various sizes. Patricia stood in front of them, demonstrating how to hold the bow. "Remember, not too tight," Patricia was saying, "like you're holding a little bird. You don't want to crush it, but you don't want it to fly away either." Maylene lingered in the doorway, watching. One little girl with glasses too big for her face was struggling, her tiny fingers awkwardly wrapped around the bow. Without thinking, Maylene stepped into the room. Patricia looked up and smiled broadly. "Maylene, you came!" All the children turned to stare at her. Maylene froze, suddenly aware she was the center of attention. "Everyone, this is Ms. Maylene. She's an amazing violinist," Patricia said. "I used to be," Maylene corrected quickly. "It's been a long time." Patricia waved away her protest. "Would you mind helping Lily with her bow hold? I think she needs a different approach than what I'm showing." Before Maylene could think of an excuse, the little girl with the glasses, Lily, was looking up at her hopefully. Maylene found herself walking over and kneeling beside Lily's chair. "Hi," she said softly. "Can I see how you're holding it?" Lily held up the bow, her knuckles white with tension. Maylene gently adjusted her fingers. "Think of it like picking up a fallen leaf," she said. "You want to be gentle but still in control." She guided Lily's hand through a motion, and the little girl's face lit up when she got it right. "Like this?" "Exactly like that." "Perfect." For the next hour, Maylene moved around the room, helping children adjust their posture, their finger positions, their bow holds. It came back to her so naturally, all the technical knowledge she thought she'd forgotten. The children responded to her quiet instructions, their small faces serious with concentration. When the class ended, the children carefully put their instruments away in cases that had seen better days. Many of the violin cases had tape patching holes or broken clasps. "These instruments have been donated," Patricia explained, noticing Maylene's gaze. "Most of our students can't afford their own. We make do with what we have." The children filed out, several of them waving goodbye to Maylene. Lily gave her a shy high five before leaving. "You're a natural teacher," Patricia said when they were alone. "The kids responded to you immediately." Maylene felt a warmth spreading through her chest. "They're good kids. We meet twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Most of these children wouldn't have access to music education otherwise." Patricia began straightening the chairs. "We could really use someone with your expertise." Just think about it," Patricia said. "We can't pay much, but we could offer a small stipend. And these kids," she gestured toward the door where the children had left. "They need someone who understands what they're going through." Maylene thought of Lily's proud smile when she finally got the bow hold right. She thought of her own childhood, how music had been her escape from everything difficult. "I'll think about it," she promised. On the bus ride home, she felt lighter somehow. Teaching those children for just an hour had awakened something she thought was dead. Her fingers tapped rhythms on her knee, muscle memory from pieces she used to play. When she got home, she walked straight to the violin case in the corner. Dust had settled on top of it. She ran her finger through it, leaving a clean line. Then, before she could change her mind, she unlatched the case. The violin lay nestled in its velvet lining, the wood still gleaming despite the years of neglect. She lifted it carefully, expecting it to feel foreign in her hands. But it didn't. It felt like meeting an old friend. She tightened the bow and applied rosin, movements so familiar they required no thought. Then she tucked the violin under her chin and drew the bow across the strings. The first note was terrible, scratchy and out of tune. Maylin winced but kept going. She tuned the strings by ear, each one slowly coming into alignment. Then she played a simple scale, her fingers stiff but remembering where to go. For an hour she played, nothing complex, just scales and simple pieces she'd learned as a child. By the end, her fingertips were sore and her shoulder ached, but something inside her had shifted. She carefully put the violin away, promising herself she would play again tomorrow. The next day at the diner, even Dale's foul mood couldn't touch her. She moved between tables with a new energy, her mind still half filled with music. During her break, she called the number on Patricia's card. "I'd like to help with the violin classes," she said when Patricia answered. "If the offer is still open, that's wonderful." Patricia sounded genuinely delighted. "Can you come in next Tuesday as well as Thursday?" Maylin thought about her work schedule. "I can come after 5 on Tuesdays. I work until 4. Perfect. We have an advanced class at 5:30 on Tuesdays." "And Maylin?" "Thank you. This means more than you know." For the first time in years, Maylin found herself looking forward to something. She practiced every night after work, her fingers slowly regaining their strength and flexibility. She dug out old music books from a box under her bed, playing through pieces that had once been second nature. The following Tuesday, she rushed from the diner to the community center, barely having time to change out of her waitress uniform in the bathroom. The advanced class had fewer students, 5 teenagers who eyed her warily when Patricia introduced her. Ms. Maylin was on track for the conservatory before life took her in a different direction, Patricia told them. "She's going to help you prepare for the winter recital." One boy in the back, with a faded t-shirt and serious eyes, raised his hand. "Can we hear you play first? So we know you're legit." Patricia started to scold him, but Maylin shook her head. "It's a fair request." She borrowed a violin from the shelf, not as good as her own, but decent enough. Taking a deep breath, she played the opening to the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, the piece she'd performed at the showcase where Patricia had first seen her. Her playing wasn't perfect. Years of waitressing had weakened her wrist, and her lack of practice showed in a few missed notes. But the music was still there, flowing through her fingers into the room. When she finished the first movement, the teenagers were staring at her with new respect. "That's what I'm talking about," the boy who had challenged her said with an appreciative nod. For the next hour, she worked with them on their technique, on making music instead of just playing notes. By the end, they were all laughing together, the initial wariness gone. Walking home that night, Maylin realized she hadn't thought about the diner or her financial worries for hours. Tomorrow she would have to face Dale and the reality of her shrinking paychecks, but for now, she held on to the feeling of the violin under her chin, the sound filling a room and the faces of children lighting up when they played something right. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Not just a waitress, not just someone struggling to get by, but Maylin, the girl who once made music that could make people stop and listen, the girl who had dreams bigger than a small diner in a forgotten corner of town. 3 weeks flew by. Maylin fell into a new rhythm, waitressing by day, teaching at the community center 2 evenings a week, practicing her violin late into the night. Her fingers developed calluses again, and the dull ache in her shoulder after playing felt like an old friend returning. The children were making progress. Lily, the little girl with the big glasses, had a natural ear for pitch. Zach, the teenage boy who had first challenged Maylin, turned out to be fiercely dedicated, often staying after class to work on difficult passages. One Thursday afternoon, Maylin arrived at the center to find Patricia looking worried, staring at a letter in her hands. "What's wrong?" Maylin asked, setting down her violin case. Patricia sighed. "Budget cuts. The city's reducing funding for arts programs and we're on the chopping block. They're giving us 3 months to become financially viable, or they'll cut our funding completely." "What does that mean for the classes?" "It means we need to raise money and fast." Patricia folded the letter and tucked it in her pocket. "But don't worry about it now. The kids are waiting." Throughout the lesson, Maylin found her mind wandering to the problem. These children needed music. For some, like Zach, it was the only thing keeping them off the streets. For others, like Lily, It was a rare chance to shine. After class, while helping to put away instruments, Maylene turned to Patricia. What if we organized a fundraiser concert? The children could perform, show everyone what they've learned. Patricia looked thoughtful. That could work. But we'd need a venue, publicity, tickets. I could help, Maylene offered. I know it's not much, but I've got some savings. Patricia shook her head firmly. You're already giving us your time. I can't ask for your money, too. Then let me organize it. I'll talk to people, find a venue. The diner gets all sorts of customers. Someone might help. That night, Maylene made a list of everything they would need. A venue, programs, refreshments, publicity. The task seemed overwhelming, but when she thought of Lily's proud smile after mastering a difficult piece, or Zach's intense focus when he played, she knew she had to try. The next day at the diner, Maylene approached her first potential helper, Tanya, who had a cousin who worked at the local newspaper. A fundraiser for music kids? Tanya said, refilling salt shakers beside her. Sure, I'll ask Miguel if he can get you a spot in the community section. Those budget cuts are hitting everyone hard. By the end of her shift, Maylene had spoken to 3 regular customers about the concert. One, an elderly man who always ordered the meatloaf special, turned out to be a retired printer who offered to make programs for free. My granddaughter plays flute in her school band, he explained. Can't have kids losing their music. Over the next few days, Maylene became a woman on a mission. She talked to everyone who might help. Customers, neighbors, former classmates she reconnected with on social media. Some doors closed in her face, but enough opened to give her hope. A week later, she presented Patricia with her progress. A local church had offered their space for free. The newspaper would run a small article. Programs would be printed, and several local businesses had donated items for a raffle. I can't believe you did all this, Patricia said, her eyes wide. You're amazing, Maylene. Maylene felt her cheeks warm at the praise. The kids are doing the hard part. They need to be ready to perform in 6 weeks. The practices became more focused, more urgent. Maylene worked with each student, choosing pieces that showcased their strengths. For the youngest ones, simple folk tunes played in unison. For the teenagers, more challenging works that required them to push their skills further. Zach was to play a solo, a piece that made Maylene's heart ache with its beauty when she heard him practice. His playing had a raw emotion to it that technique alone couldn't teach. Where did you learn to play like that? She asked him once after practice. He shrugged, suddenly shy. I just think about stuff when I play. You know, feelings and junk. That's exactly right, she told him. That's what makes music special. As the concert date approached, Maylene found herself practicing her own violin more intensely. She wasn't scheduled to perform, this was about the children, but playing helped her think, helped her work through the stress of organizing everything while still working full-time at the diner. One night, after a particularly exhausting day where Dale had cut her hours again, she sat on the edge of her bed with her violin, playing a piece she'd loved since childhood. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, carrying away the day's frustrations. When she finished, she heard clapping from the other side of the thin apartment wall. Bravo, called her neighbor, an older woman she rarely saw except to nod hello in the hallway. I didn't know we had a professional musician in the building. Maylene laughed softly. Not professional. Not anymore. Could have fooled me, the voice called back. The night of the concert arrived with unexpected drama. 2 hours before it was set to begin, Lily called Maylene in tears. Her mother couldn't find her good shoes. Her hair ribbon was missing, and she was sure she would forget every note. Take a deep breath, Maylene told her calmly. Your regular shoes are fine. I have extra ribbons, and you know your music better than you think. Trust yourself. After calming Lily, Maylene rushed to the church to help set up. The space looked different with chairs arranged in neat rows, programs stacked on a table by the door, a makeshift stage area set up at the front. Patricia was directing a group of parents who were setting out refreshments. We've sold almost all the tickets, Patricia whispered excitedly when Maylene approached. And the raffle items look great. The students began arriving, dressed in their best clothes, instruments clutched tightly. Maylene moved among them, adjusting a bow tie here, tuning a violin there, offering words of encouragement to each one. Remember to breathe, she told a wide-eyed Lily, whose hair was now adorned with not 1 but 3 ribbons. What if I mess up? Lily whispered. Then you keep going. That's what musicians do. Zach arrived last, looking uncomfortable in a button-up shirt that seemed slightly too small for him. My mom found this in my dad's old stuff, he explained, tugging at the collar. Said I had to wear it. You look very professional, Mei Lin assured him. As the audience filed in, filling nearly every seat, Mei Lin peeked through the door at the back. She recognized faces from the diner, from her apartment building, and even a few old acquaintances from her conservatory days whom she'd reached out to on a whim. The concert began with the youngest group, playing Twinkle Twinkle with intense concentration. There were a few squeaky notes and one moment when they didn't all start together, but the audience applauded enthusiastically when they finished. One by one, the groups performed, each piece slightly more advanced than the last. Lily's small ensemble played a simple Mozart melody, and though they took it at half the intended speed, every note was clear and in tune. Mei Lin stood in the wings, her heart swelling with pride for each student. This was why music mattered, not for perfection, but for the joy of creating something beautiful together, for the confidence it built, for the connections it formed. Finally, it was time for Zach's solo. He walked to the center of the stage, his face serious. For a moment, Mei Lin worried he might freeze, but then he lifted his violin and began to play. The piece was Massenet's Meditation from the opera Thais, lyrical, emotional, and challenging. Zach played it with a maturity beyond his years, his eyes closed, body swaying slightly with the phrases. When he reached the final delicate high note, the audience was completely silent, holding their breath until the sound faded away. Then came the applause, thunderous, immediate. Zach looked startled by the response, his serious expression breaking into a surprised smile. He bowed awkwardly and hurried off stage where Mei Lin waited. That was incredible, she told him, her voice thick with emotion. He ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. I messed up that shift in the middle section. Nobody noticed. You played with your heart, and that's what people hear. After the final group performance, Patricia took the stage to thank everyone for coming and to explain about the funding situation. She spoke passionately about the importance of music education, especially for children who wouldn't otherwise have access to it. And now, Patricia said, we have a special surprise. The person who made this evening possible, who has worked tirelessly with our students, will perform for us. Please welcome Mei Lin Chen. Mei Lin froze backstage. This wasn't planned. She wasn't prepared to play in public, not after all these years. But Patricia was gesturing for her to come out, and the audience was applauding expectantly. Taking a deep breath, Mei Lin stepped onto the stage, her violin in hand. She looked out at the sea of faces, her students watching with wide eyes, the community that had come together to support them, Patricia nodding encouragingly from the side, and then she began to play. The moment Mei Lin's bow touched the strings, everything else faded away, the audience, her nerves, the years of doubt. There was only the music. She played Bach's Air on the G-string, a piece that had always felt like coming home to her. Her fingers remembered the way, moving across the fingerboard with a confidence she hadn't felt in years. The violin sang under her touch, its voice filling the church with warm, golden sound. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence before the applause began. It washed over her like a wave, bringing her back to the present moment. She saw Lily clapping wildly, Zach nodding with approval, Patricia wiping away a tear. Mei Lin bowed, her cheeks flushed, and hurried off the stage. The concert concluded with Patricia announcing the amount they'd raised through ticket sales and the raffle, nearly $2,000, enough to keep the program running for another 6 months. Later, as they were cleaning up, a woman approached Mei Lin. She was elegantly dressed, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, and she carried herself with unmistakable authority. Ms. Chen, I'm Eleanor Wright, director of the City Orchestra's outreach program. Mei Lin shook her hand, puzzled. Nice to meet you.
How did you hear about our concert?
Patricia invited me. We've worked together on various projects over the years. Eleanor handed Mei Lin a business card. Your playing tonight was remarkable, especially for someone who hasn't performed professionally in some time. And your work with these children shows real teaching talent. Thank you, Mei Lin said, still confused about why the woman was telling her this. Our program is expanding. We're looking for musicians who can both perform with the orchestra and teach in schools throughout the city. Eleanor's eyes were sharp, assessing. It's a paid position, Ms. Chen, full benefits. And it would put that violin of yours to much better use than it's getting now. Mei Lin's heart skipped a beat. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an audition. Next Friday, 10 a.m. at the Civic Center. The piece is your choice, but something that showcases both technical skill and musicality. Eleanor smiled slightly. Based on what I heard tonight, I think you have a very good chance. After Eleanor left, Mei Lin stood frozen, the business card clutched in her hand. Patricia hurried over. What did she say? Did she offer you an audition? Mei Lin nodded, still stunned. How did you know she would be here? I didn't know for sure she would come. I just sent invitations to everyone I could think of who might be able to help, either the program or the people in it. Patricia squeezed her arm. You deserve this chance, Mei Lin. You're too talented to spend your life serving coffee. The next morning, Mei Lin woke early, Eleanor's card on her nightstand. The possibility of a real music job, one that would let her quit the diner, seemed too good to be true. She picked up her violin and began to practice, running through pieces she might play for the audition. Her phone rang, interrupting her. It was her mother. Mei Lin? Are you sitting down? I need to tell you something. Mei Lin's stomach dropped. Her mother only started conversations this way when something was wrong. What is it? Are you okay? The doctor found something on my scan yesterday. They want to do more tests. The world seemed to tilt beneath Mei Lin's feet. What kind of tests? They're not sure yet. It might be nothing. But if the cancer is back, we need to be prepared. Her mother's voice was steady, practical. The insurance will cover some of it, but not all. I wanted you to know now before we get the results next week. After hanging up, Mei Lin sat on the edge of her bed, violin forgotten in her lap. If her mother needed treatment again, there would be bills. Lots of them. The timing of the orchestra job suddenly seemed cruel. A glimpse of escape just as the door was about to slam shut again. She went through her shift at the diner in a fog, mixing up orders and forgetting to refill coffee cups. Dale noticed, his perpetual frown deepening. If you can't keep your head in the game, Chen, I can find someone who will, he snapped after she dropped a plate. I'm sorry, she said automatically, bending to clean up the broken pieces. That evening, instead of practicing, she sat at her kitchen table with a calculator and her bank statements, trying to figure out how much she could contribute to her mother's medical bills. The numbers were discouraging. Even with the small stipend from the community center and her diner salary, she barely covered her own expenses. The orchestra job would pay better, much better. But the audition was a week away, and her mother's test results would come before that. If they were bad, could she really focus on preparing? And even if she got the job, it might be weeks or months before her first paycheck. For the next few days, Mei Lin lived in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions at work, teaching her classes at the center, practicing when she could focus enough to do so. She didn't tell anyone about her mother's situation, not even Patricia, who noticed her distraction but didn't press when Mei Lin said she was just tired. 3 days before the audition, her mother called again. The results are in, she said, her voice giving away nothing. Mei Lin closed her eyes, bracing herself. And it's not cancer. The relief was so intense that Mei Lin had to sit down, her legs suddenly weak. You're sure? They're absolutely sure? Completely sure. It's a benign cyst. They'll remove it, but it's a simple procedure. The doctor says I'll be back to normal in a week. After the call, Mei Lin picked up her violin and played, not practicing, just playing for the pure joy of it, the music and expression of her relief and gratitude. Then she turned her attention to the audition piece she had chosen. The first movement of Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, the same piece Patricia had heard her play years ago. She practiced with renewed focus, the weight lifted from her shoulders. For once, there was no crisis looming, no impossible choice to make, just the music and the possibility of a future she had thought forever closed to her. The morning of the audition, she woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She dressed carefully in the nicest clothes she owned, black pants and a deep blue blouse she'd bought years ago for conservatory recitals. Her violin case, once dusty from neglect, now showed signs of regular use, the latches well-oiled, the handle smooth from her grip. The Civic Center was an imposing building downtown, its marble steps leading up to tall glass doors. Inside, the lobby echoed with her footsteps as she followed the signs to the audition room. Outside the door, Maylene paused to collect herself. She could hear another violinist inside, playing a passage from Tchaikovsky. The sound was polished, professional, a reminder that she was competing against musicians who hadn't stepped away from their craft for years. For a moment, doubt crept in. Who was she to think she could step back into this world? A waitress playing teacher at a community center, pretending she belonged among real musicians. Then she remembered Zach's face when he'd nailed that difficult passage. Lily's determination as she practiced the same measure over and over. Patricia's unwavering belief in her abilities. She thought of her mother, who had sacrificed so much to give her the chance to learn music in the first place. Ms. Chen, a young man with a clipboard, had opened the door. "We're ready for you now." The audition room was smaller than she'd expected, with excellent acoustics. 3 people sat behind a table, Eleanor Wright in the center, flanked by a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a younger woman whose sharp gaze reminded Maylin of her strictest conservatory professors. "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Chen," Eleanor said, her expression neutral. Maylin took a deep breath, positioned her violin, and began to play. The opening of the Mendelssohn was delicate, exposed. There was nowhere to hide any flaws. But as she continued into the piece, something shifted inside her. She wasn't playing for the panel or for a job or even for herself. She was playing for all the moments music had saved her, for all the children who deserved the chance she'd once had, for the pure love of creating something beautiful in an often difficult world. Her technique wasn't flawless. Years of waitressing had taken their toll on her wrist strength and flexibility. But her playing had something it had lacked in her conservatory days, a depth of emotion that only comes from living through hardship and finding your way back to joy. When she finished, she lowered her violin and waited, heart pounding. The woman with the sharp gaze leaned over to whisper something to Eleanor, who nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Chen," Eleanor said. "That was very moving. We have a few questions before you go." The interview that followed was more conversation than interrogation. They asked about her teaching experience, her approach with children, her thoughts on making classical music accessible to diverse communities. Maylin answered honestly, drawing on her time at the center, watching children discover the power of music for the first time. "One last question," the man with kind eyes said. "Why do you want this position? After stepping away from music for so long, why come back now?" Maylin considered her answer carefully. "I never really left music," she said finally. "It was always there, waiting for me to find my way back. I want this job because I've seen what music can do, for children who need something to believe in, for communities that need something to unite around, for people who need a voice for feelings too complex for words. I want to be part of making that happen, not just for myself but for others." As she left the building, violin case in hand, Maylin felt a strange sense of peace. Whether she got the job or not, she had played her best, spoken her truth. For the first time in years, she was walking forward, not looking back. 3 days after her audition, Maylin was refilling salt shakers at the diner when her phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at Dale, who was busy yelling at the new cook, then slipped into the back hallway to check the message. It was from Eleanor Wright. "Please call me at your earliest convenience regarding the orchestra position." Maylin's hand trembled as she dialed the number. She pressed herself against the wall, one finger in her ear to block out the kitchen noise. "Ms. Chen," Eleanor's crisp voice answered. "Thank you for returning my call promptly." "Of course," Maylin said, her mouth suddenly dry. "I was eager to hear your decision. The committee was impressed with your audition. Your technique, while showing some understandable signs of hiatus, has a solid foundation. More importantly, your musicality and your teaching philosophy align with our program's mission." Maylin held her breath, waiting for the but that would follow. Instead, Eleanor said, "We would like to offer you the position, starting next month. The salary is $45,000 annually, with health benefits beginning after a 90-day probationary period. You would be teaching 3 days a week in various schools and performing with the orchestra on weekends." For a moment, Maylin couldn't speak. It was more money than she'd ever made, more security than she'd had since leaving the conservatory, and a chance to play professionally again. "Miss Chen, are you there?" Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I accept. Thank you so much for this opportunity. After hanging up, Mei Lin leaned against the wall, eyes closed, letting the reality sink in. She could quit the diner. She could afford a better apartment. She could help her mother if she needed it again. Chen! Dale's voice shattered her moment of peace. Break's over. Table 7 needs coffee. Mei Lin straightened her apron and walked back into the diner, a small smile playing on her lips. For once, Dale's barking didn't bother her. This was her second to last week here. She'd already given her notice, though she hadn't told Dale why she was leaving. That evening, Mei Lin went straight to the community center. She found Patricia in the office, sorting through sheet music. "I got the job," Mei Lin announced, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Patricia jumped up and hugged her. "I knew you would." "Oh, Mei Lin, this is wonderful news. I start in 2 weeks. I'll be teaching in schools around the city and playing with the orchestra." "The children will miss you terribly," Patricia said, though her smile remained genuine. "You've made such a difference here." Mei Lin shook her head. "I'm not leaving the center. I can't teach as many hours, but I'd like to keep working with the Tuesday evening group if that's okay. They're preparing for the spring recital, and I promised Zach I'd help him with the Bach partita. Of course it's okay. It's more than okay." Patricia squeezed her arm. "I'm so proud of you, Mei Lin. You've come full circle." The next weeks passed in a blur. Mei Lin worked her final shifts at the diner, telling the regular customers goodbye. Some seemed genuinely sorry to see her go, especially the old man who'd printed the concert programs. On her last day, even Tanya hugged her. "You're going to be great," Tanya whispered. "Show them what you can do." Dale barely acknowledged her departure, just grunted and handed her final paycheck over. As Mei Lin hung up her apron for the last time, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also gratitude for what the job had given her when she needed it most. Survival. Her first day with the orchestra program began with orientation at the Civic Center. Eleanor introduced her to the other musicians and teachers, outlining her schedule for the coming weeks. Mei Lin would be teaching at 3 different schools, working with children from 4th grade through high school. Most of these kids have never held an instrument before, Eleanor explained as they walked to her office. "Our goal isn't to create professional musicians, though it's wonderful when that happens. It's to give them access to music education, to show them possibilities they might not otherwise see." It sounded exactly like what Patricia had been doing at the community center, just on a larger scale. Mei Lin felt a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place. Her first classroom teaching experience came the following day at an elementary school in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. The 4th grade class watched with wide eyes as she unpacked her violin. "Who knows what this is?" she asked, holding it up. "A tiny guitar," one boy called out, making the class laugh. Mei Lin smiled. "Close, it's a violin. It's like a guitar's smaller cousin. They're from the same family of instruments, the string family." She played a short, lively piece, watching their faces light up with interest. Then she let them take turns holding the violin, showing them how to tuck it under their chin, how to hold the bow. "Next week we'll have violins for each of you," she promised. "You'll learn to play your own music." One little girl with braided hair and serious eyes lingered after the others had filed out for lunch. "Ms. Chen, do you think I could learn to play like you someday?" The question brought Mei Lin back to her own childhood, to the first time she'd heard a violin and felt that pull, that certainty that this was something she needed to do. "Absolutely," she told the girl. "It takes practice and patience, but if you love it enough, you can definitely learn." As the weeks passed, Mei Lin settled into her new role. The orchestra rehearsals were challenging. She was rusty compared to the other musicians, many of whom had never stepped away from their training. But the conductor was patient, and she practiced diligently in the evenings, regaining her old skills and developing new ones. The teaching brought unexpected joy. Each school was different, each group of children unique in their approach to music. Some took to it naturally, some struggled but persevered, some mainly wanted to make noise. Mei Lin found ways to reach all of them, drawing on her own experiences and what she'd learned from Patricia. She kept her promise to stay involved at the community center, working with her Tuesday evening students. Zach was making remarkable progress with the Bach, his natural talent blossoming with proper guidance. "I applied to the Arts High School," he told her one evening after class. "The one downtown?" That's fantastic, Maylin said. When's your audition? Next month. Will you help me prepare? His eyes, usually so confident, showed a flicker of vulnerability. Of course I will. We'll work on it every Tuesday, and you can call me if you have questions between sessions. 2 months into her new job, Eleanor called Mei Lin into her office. For a moment, Mei Lin feared something was wrong, that her teaching wasn't measuring up, that her playing wasn't strong enough. Instead, Eleanor said, I have a proposal for you. The orchestra is planning a special concert for the end of the school year, featuring music written specifically for our education program. We need a piece that showcases what the children have learned, something they can perform alongside the professional musicians. That sounds wonderful, Mei Lin said. We'd like you to compose it. Mei Lin blinked in surprise. Me? I'm not a composer. You understand both worlds, the professional orchestra and the beginning student. You know what will challenge the children appropriately without overwhelming them. Eleanor leaned forward. Think about it. This would be a meaningful addition to our program. Mei Lin had never considered composing, but that night, sitting at her kitchen table, she found herself sketching out musical ideas, simple themes the children could play, with more complex counter-melodies for the orchestra. She thought about her students at the various schools, about Lily and Zach at the community center, about what music had meant to her at different points in her life. The piece began to take shape. Waitress's Sonata, she called it privately, a musical journey from loss to rediscovery, from silence to song. She worked on it in the evenings, letting it evolve naturally, surprising herself with her own creativity. When she finally presented the completed score to Eleanor, the older woman read through it carefully, her expression thoughtful. This is exactly what we needed, she said finally. Simple enough for the beginners, interesting enough for the professionals, and genuinely moving throughout. We'll begin rehearsals next week. The weeks leading up to the concert were hectic. Mei Lin worked with students at all 3 schools, preparing them for their parts in her composition. She consulted with the conductor about tempo and dynamics, made last-minute adjustments to accommodate the varying skill levels of the children. On the night of the performance, she stood backstage at the Civic Center's main hall, watching as the children filed in, dressed in their best clothes, instruments clutched nervously in their hands. Her mother sat in the front row, fully recovered from her surgery, her face glowing with pride. Patricia was there too, with Lily and several other students from the center. Zach wasn't performing. He'd been accepted to the Arts High School and was busy with their pre-admission summary program, but he'd promised to come hear the piece as the children took their places alongside the professional musicians. Mei Lin felt a swell of emotion. The conductor raised his baton and the music began, her music, bringing together all the threads of her journey. From her place in the violin section, Mei Lin watched the children's faces as they played, their concentration, their joy when they succeeded in a difficult passage. This was why she'd been drawn to music all those years ago, not for applause or acclaim, but for this, the transcendent moment when individual efforts blend into something larger, something beautiful. The final note hung in the air, resonant and full of possibility. Then came the applause, washing over them all like a benediction. Mei Lin looked out at the audience, at her mother's tear-streaked face, at Patricia's knowing smile, and knew she had come home at last, not to where she'd started, but to where she was meant to be.